you guys all for joining in on this crossbow chat. Um, I'm just going to be kind of going off the wing here. I got a couple notes that I like to talk about, but I really like having like a live discussion going. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to throw them in that chat or give some sort of signal, and I can let you get in there with the voice, and we can talk it out and figure out what's going on. But anyway, yeah. So crossbows. If you guys don't know, by the way, I'm Acrid the Scarecrow. I'm from Barradoon or Las Vegas. You might see me around at like Bifter, Chaos Wars. I also play Ant Guard, so I'm a bit around. And I've been playing this game for about 10 years now. But anyway, so crossbows, they don't really get talked about a lot. And up until a few years ago, they didn't really have the rule set to make them super viable. You can thank Sir Torix for pretty much any sort of development for crossbows that are going to be happening in the next few years, because he got the rules changed for the poundages so that they're way more viable and still extremely safe. So this last Bifter, so Battle for the Ring event in California, you probably all know about it. There's probably a few new people that don't. We kind of debuted these pistol crossbows. Me and my realm mate Galvin, we brought out these bad boys right here. Boom. And I'll talk about this a little bit later. But we brought these guys out, and we had a blast. We had a lot of fun shooting people. We got a lot of questions. I had tons of people messaging me. I've kind of become known as the Crossbow Knight, which I'm totally cool with. Whip says they were a nightmare. I'm glad to hear it. Deal with that in the future. So yeah, I thought this would be fun to kind of talk about them and how they're going to be developing and kind of like what the rules are involved with them and kind of the gear as well. So first of all, this is the actual crossbow. The brand I use is the PSE Viper SS. Is a handheld crossbow that you can get at like Big Five or Sportsman's Warehouse or even on Amazon. I bought this one at Big Five and they actually had a sale going on, so I got this one for $35. It's actually my second one. I broke my first one. But they usually go for somewhere between $35 and $50, so it's not too bad. It has a 50-inch or 50-pound bow, so the actual bow here is 50 pounds, which sounds pretty strong when you compare it to our 35-pound bow on a regular bow. But it's not as bad because it doesn't get pulled back as far. And that's where the next part comes in, is power stroke, which is the distance between the string and where the string rests, which is in between these two forks here. I don't know if you guys can see that. And that's about 6 inches on this guy. So you normally, 6.5 inches. So for the rules set, you're going to actually multiply those numbers together, and it has to be below 450. So this one hits about somewhere between 325, which is more than you'll really need. Seeing a stronger one might be able to shoot faster or a little bit harder. But this guy's great. I highly recommend this one just because it's cheap, accessible, and I kind of know it, which is pretty nice. The box that it comes in, it's got a couple cool tools as well. It comes with like a stringer. I just kind of leave mine strung. It comes with sights. Those aren't very legal, so take those off. You'll notice that mine actually does have an attachment here. This is for a GoPro. So normally that'll be removed at an event, but for GoPro videos, we put this little mount on there, which was super easy to add because it's just a little screw. And then it also comes with like an Allen wrench, which is very important for tightening. There's this little bolt right here. You can tighten it and make sure that this isn't going to go anywhere. And you'll want to keep that on you because it actually gets loose over time. And then it comes with like wax, which is really nice. There's also a secondary grip that comes on the front, so you can like hold it with two hands. But I've removed all that stuff to kind of just keep the bow nice and light, so I can like swing it around and stuff. Going through my notes here. Sorry about that, guys. So now The coolest thing about this crossbow that you'll see versus any of the crossbows I've seen in the past where they're like made out of wood, or they're like actual historical crossbows, is you don't have to pull it back like this. It has an actual cocking mechanism, and you'll see this on a few different brands, but on this particular one, so there's this red button here, and I'm going to press it, and this goes back, cock it like that, and then boom, just like that. Super quick, super easy. It's loaded, ready to go. It actually has 2 safety features on this bad boy. So the first one's kind of hard to see. It's actually in the housing. There's a little pin that comes down, and as long as that pin's down, it can't fire. So that's what this is for, is an arrow actually goes in here and lifts that pin. Right about there. Kind of hard to see, but yeah, it lifts that pin. And then the next safety, still can't shoot it, is this red button here, which you push forward. Boom, safety's off. Now it's ready to fire. It's really cool. That's kind of what the thing that makes these super viable, in my opinion, is.
Yeah.
Hey, Igua. But yeah, the cocking mechanism and the safeties really make it super, well, not the safeties, but the cocking mechanism makes it super viable, because one of the downsides of a crossbow versus a regular bow is your reload time. You know, there's people out there that can reload a regular bow and shoot arrow after arrow very, very fast. But a crossbow, it takes some time to, especially the traditional ones, you have to cock them and load them and so on and so forth. So it takes a bit. But yeah, once you got it loaded, it's super easy to just kind of shoot. I'll try and shoot it at the floor here. Hit the kitchen, it's all good. And yeah, throw any questions you got. Sometimes I get a little camera shy, so I might like lock up in a bit. Range of the bolt. Yeah, let me get down to that. All right, so I'm gonna just kind of start kind of on my notes here. I'll definitely get down to your question when we get more down into the combat area. One thing that I do want to talk about is that the triggering mechanism can sometimes hiccup. I've had some problems where it gets stuck or it won't cock or whatever like that. Most of the time you can kind of correct it by pulling the trigger again, and it kind of resets it. Other times you might have to disengage the safeties and fire the bow, like shoot an empty arrow. The triggers are rather finicky, so I don't recommend you throwing this on the ground or dropping it from too hard. And be aware that, you know, whatever equipment you take onto the battlefield, it could get broken, so that's something to be aware of. I've dropped this one safely. I kind of bring my arm closer to the ground and then let it go, and kind of off to the side so it doesn't get trampled. If there's out of game areas, like on a bridge battle or whatever, I'll try to put it in the dead zone, so that it doesn't get trampled on, because you know, it is rather cheap at 35 to 50 bucks, but having to buy it multiple times is kind of rough. One thing that we can also talk about is the bolts themselves. So my bolts here, this is actually just a regular arrow shaft that you would normally get for any sort of bow, but they're obviously cut much smaller. This one, I cut it to about 14 inches, and then I put the head on. So it comes out to about somewhere between 16 and 17 inches on this. And that's a really cool thing, because it's a great way to recycle broken arrows. So if you have a regular arrow on the field and it gets stepped on and snapped in half, guess what? You got 2 crossbow bolts. You'll also see that I've removed one of the fletchings. This makes it easier to load the crossbow, because the crossbow has this nice little pin here, which holds the arrow. I don't know if you guys can see that, but there's this pin there. So a third fletching would kind of get in the way. So I think these ones actually just kind of lost their fletchings when they were normal arrows, but I've also removed them purposefully for these process. Another thing to talk about these is that the knocks on mine are a bit different. Let me find a good example. So one of the problems that I've been having with using a regular knock inside of the crossbow is the power that the string hits the knock. It can actually sometimes break it. That doesn't stop you from shooting the crossbow bolts again, but there is a rule in our rule book that says that knocks have to be in good repair. So it's important to like make sure how your knocks look. Before I bought these guys, which I'll talk about in a second here, I just carried around a ton of knocks and like, oh, this knock broke, replace it. It's not too hard to just swap them back out. They normally go for quite a while before they break. But after a while, I was like, okay, I'm tired of doing that. So I got these. These are called half moon knocks. And if I get it close to the camera, you can kind of see here that they don't clamp onto the string like a normal knock would. They literally are the shape of a half moon. And these are crossbow bolt knocks. So they're open and the string can sit in there without like damaging it. These ones, unfortunately, didn't fit perfectly in a regular arrow shaft, so I had to take a Dremel to it in order to fit it in there nice and snug. Otherwise, it just wouldn't fit in there at all. So something to be aware of. If you are able to find these that fit in regular arrow shafts, highly recommend that. Otherwise, in the future, I'd like to see maybe some changes to knock rules to allow crossbow bolts to have flat end knocks or to have some sort of change to that. All right. Yeah, so we already fired a bow, so you kind of got to see what that was like. So let's talk about kind of like what the rules that kind of go into the crossbows. We've already talked about the crossbow itself and how that's obviously super legal by the poundage. But there are a couple questions about this guy here. So bolts are supposed to be checked like regular arrows in terms of construction. Like obviously I'm going to feel it like I normally would any other arrow. But they have one really weird rule that's kind of just a layover from some old stuff. And it says crossbow bolts must be able to be fired from a standard bow. And obviously they're kind of short. So to prove that they can be fired from a regular bow, I happen to have a regular bow here. And it really would depend on your brace height on your bow. But I have fired the crossbow bolt from a bow. Is it a super effective on the battlefield maneuver? No, but I have gotten a few legs with it. So it can be fired. Maybe it's not as well as the rules intend. But it is a thing, and it does pass the check. I hear that's a layover rule from, I guess, some event. I think it was a Chaos Wars or something, but there was a vendor who had traditional old school crossbows that you had to load manually. He only had a few crossbows, maybe two, but 100 crossbow bolts, and it held up weapons check for some time. So that rule was kind of put in there so that people could use regular bows to fire crossbow bolts. I think that's kind of a exception and not the rule. I think most people that have a crossbow, they're going to be quick fire ones like the ones that I'm showing you guys here, or they're not going to have that many bolts. There's no way I would ever take 100 crossbow bolts onto the field. It just doesn't seem viable in a way. So that's something else that I'm looking into. I'm working with Sir Acrid to kind of get those rules kind of changed so that crossbows and crossbow bolts can pass more unanimously or uniform across the country. And they fit more in line with how the weapon should be used and how it should be checked. Another thing about that same rule is that bolt that I shot from the regular bow, that's not going to hit as hard as if I fired it from my crossbow. So I definitely believe that there should be a rule in there that says that crossbow bolts are fired from whatever would hit the hardest, whether that's a regular bow or a crossbow. It should be fired from one of those. And that's how we checked it at Bifter. We fired them all from the crossbow. There's also one other important rule, and that's less about weapons checking and more about combat. And that's a rule that says that crossbow bolts can't be fired at a target within 15 feet. It's a really important rule, actually, and it's not necessarily about how the opponent receives the hit. Like you would think, you're like, oh, okay, maybe that 15 puts rules in there so they don't get hit as hard. I've accidentally shot people within 10 feet and had no problems, even in the head. But the crossbows and the bolts, they actually get a lot of energy initially. And that rule is there for bounce back. Because if you were to shoot a shield within 15 feet with one of these, it would bounce back pretty quickly towards you. And we all know how dangerous Nox can be. So the one piece of advice I give a lot of people when they're doing this is if you have a target that's at like 15 feet and they suddenly start rushing you, I would fire at maybe someone behind them, someone off to the side, or fire at the ground. And I think that's a good piece of advice because getting your crossbow hit kind of might be a little dangerous because like I said, the triggering mechanism can be a little sketchy, but having it hit while it's loaded is going to be even worse of a problem. You're going to have a much higher chance of causing a jam or a break. But yeah, and then, sorry, I feel like I overestimated the time I would take on this because I'm kind of rushing through it. But so field usage, just kind of talk about how crossbows are actually used on the field. The best way to kind of look at a crossbow is don't look at it as like a handheld bow. You're not going to be that guy that's 100 feet away shooting people and taking them down that way. You're not going to be an archer. The best way to explain a crossbow is they're more like really small, really fast javelins. Compared to a bow, crossbows lack range. Their reload time just is worse, no matter how cool the reload, like the cocking mechanism is, no matter how fast like you are good at it. The reload time is just going to be worse than a bow. But there are quite a few advantages that a crossbow has over a bow. One, it can be wielded at the same time as a shield. So like you can have this, I call it shield and gun, and just you have your board and you got your crossbow, which means you can defend yourself, you can block, and like shoot people from all over. It's surprisingly fast and then rather accurate, up to about 30 feet. After that, it kind of slows down from the inertia. So people don't really pay attention to it, and they don't realize how fast these crossbow bolts can come out. And suddenly they hear the clack of the string being swat, and they're just dead. One of the cooler things is like once you load the crossbow, once it's loaded and ready to go, you don't have to like hold your muscles like you would another bow. You just there, and you can hold that all day. Super cool. You can also use it with one arm. I know some archers, when they lose an arm, they'll go on the ground and become like a human turret, put their legs against the limbs and pull with their non-missing arm. But with this, like, if I'm missing an arm, I still got it. Yeah, and I can do pretty much everything. Loading might be a little tricky. I've actually have a realm partner who put a special ring on his belt specifically for cocking it with only one hand, so he can put the nose in the ring and cock it. So even though you're handicapped, super easy to keep using the crossbow versus a regular bow. You can hide it, which is another really cool thing. Is like if you have a shield, like I said, you can go that shield and gun style. You can hide that bow until the last second, and then shoot someone that's 15 feet away, shoot their partner, shoot a spearman, and they just thought you were a sword and border, or they thought you were just coming up with just a shield. You can even possibly hide it behind your back. I don't know, but that's all up to you. And then another really cool thing about it is you can fire the crossbow from like all sorts of weird angles. I've even done things where like I come up and shoot downwards over like shield walls or across bridges, because of that little limb there, or the little pin. You can even hold this crossbow sideways if you want to shoot like a gangster. Whatever you want to do, like it's, as long as you're not like shaking it really heavily, you can mostly move this around in any way that you want, even upside down. And that's not something you can totally do with a bow, I don't think. But someone can prove me wrong. Usually when I like step on the field and I'm going to be out there as a crossbowman, I have it as a sidearm. And normally I'm fighting like sword and board. So I'll start with one bolt locked and loaded and ready to go. And then I have my sword on my hip and my shield in my left hand because I'm right-handed. And I try to like pick off people that are around. You know, you got your same targets that you would if you were an archer. I try to pick off people that are unaware, people that aren't really paying attention, especially because, you know, they're looking for big bows, you know, tall 56-inch to 60-inch bows to shoot them. So they're not going to be looking for a tiny handheld hand cannon. And then obviously pole arm wielders, same kind of reason you would as an archer shoot them. They're less defended, they don't have any forward facing shields, and they're a big threat on the field. Commanders, anyone giving any sort of commands, and then your veterans, obviously, if you see someone who is known to be a really good fighter, pick them off. Just shoot them, even if it's in the leg. Just pick them off. I try to load the crossbow behind my shield, so I kind of put it forward, and I can actually grab the handle of my shield as well as the nose of the gun and pull it. And that's really cool because it kind of prevents anti arrows from the other side. So while I happen to be loading, they can't just shoot me like you would if you saw someone else loading their bow. If I'm rushed or I run out of bolts, I can easily just like holster the crossbow. I haven't made a cool holster yet, but maybe in the future. Or I can put it behind my shield, or I can gently drop it off to the side and then engage in normal killing on the field. And yeah, definitely rushed through this much faster than I thought I would. So we'll just kind of keep talking about it. And if you guys have any questions, let me know. I know there was that question about the range. So the effective range, I would say, is somewhere between obviously 15 feet is the minimum that you can go. And I'd say up to maybe like 30 is like your hot zone. That's where you're on fire. You can kill anyone in that kind of zone. Out of that range, between like the 30 to 45, it loses a bit of accuracy. And then when you're at like the 50 feet, like the crossbow bolts, they fall kind of fast because they get a lot of inertia, or they get a lot of energy to begin with. But because they're so small, they don't have a lot of inertia. So their initial start speed is really high. And then that wind resistance kicks in and they lose their speed really fast after like a certain amount of time. How do I see the chat? Here's the chat. How hard is it to aim versus a regular bowl? I think it depends on the range. If I'm shooting something within like the 30 foot, well, I mean, which one's harder to aim? It's really nice to just point and click with a crossbow bolt, but it's not too hard to aim at something similar with a regular bow. I think within the short range, I feel like my crossbow might be a bit more accurate, and it's a bit sneakier of accuracy because people don't really aren't really aware of it, and like you can pull that trigger at any time. Um, whereas with a regular bow, I don't know. It's hard to say. Definitely at further ranges, the bow is probably easier to aim because you would have to arc a shot from a crossbow for further distances. Saba had a good point here. They said that it depends on the poundage, obviously. If you have a higher poundage crossbow, it can go a bit further. I have not seen another model that's easily as accessible that is of a higher poundage. Um, I found one on Amazon at one time, and a realmate actually bought it, and it was supposed to be an 80-pound bow with a 6-inch power stroke, so it was supposed to come out to 440 inch pounds. But unfortunately, when he got it in, it actually pulled at 50 pounds. Um, so it was about the same as mine. Oh, Sabbath shared their crossbow. That is really neat. This is one of those like old school looking ones. It's super cool, but it's got that nice pin that holds the crossbow bolt. Um, it definitely probably looks better than mine on the field, at least from a medieval standpoint. Um, very nice. Question: distance from end of the foam head to fletch in inches. Well, let me find a ruler real quick. All right, tip of the head to the fletching, the top of the fletchings or the bottom of the fletchings. We'll see. So the whole thing is about 17 inches. And it looks like, oh, that's all sort of distorted. The bottom here is 16, so that's that. And then these are kind of longer fletchings, and that's about 13. And they're just old bows, or bow arrows. All right. Sabo goes on to say, the reason I ask, with ranges over 30 feet, the bolt tends to lose stability and tumbles. Yeah, I've definitely kind of seen that with some of them. It also kind of depends on, sometimes I have a little bit of wobble just in the arrows. Like this one kind of has a bit of a curve to it. I don't know if you can see that on video. So I haven't really noticed like too much of a difference. But getting the range is a little difficult after 30 feet with the one that I have. And that probably is just a poundage thing. Like I said, this one's 325 inch-pounds versus like the 450 that's allowed by the rules. Pet asks, do you think more rule changes will be necessary in the future? I think there's definitely some rule changes that need to be made to accommodate the bows and allow them to kind of flourish as a weapon. They definitely bring a lot of different flavor to the game and change up the metagame. Can't wear the hat right now with that. But there are still some like relics. Like I said, there's the one about requiring to be fired from a regular bow. It just doesn't seem to make sense to me. I think I would like to see something that says that they have to be, they're fired from a crossbow. The knocks, I would like to see something changed about the knocks that allow flat end knocks for crossbow bolts. It's just more effective that way for them. And it allows the crossbows from breaking the knocks like I had problems with in the past. I could even see some sort of a compromise where people in weapons check or people going to weapons check with crossbows are only allowed so many bolts per crossbow. That way we prevent the issue that they had at that event where there was hundreds of bolts but only a few crossbows. I think the poundage is about right. I have yet to see a crossbow that's of a higher strength, so I can't really test it completely. I would like to in the future, but I think it's good. The 15-foot rule is great. I think bounce back is an issue, so that should stay. And other than that, I think a lot of it is just getting people used to how to check them, what to expect from them, and not to be like afraid of them. And that's like a big thing that happens when you introduce like a new piece of tech or piece of gear to the field. Even if it is legal, some people might have problems with it just because it's unfamiliar. I know that like rounded domed arrowheads for a while had some issues passing. I've definitely experienced that where people would fail my regular arrows uh, specifically for having domed heads just because they haven't ever seen that before and having to go get them rechecked and then passed. So yeah, I think just things need to be more clarified and some rules need to be adapted. But overall, I like the direction that it's going. And Oroku's expressed interest in me and him getting together to formulate some of those rules. But obviously, I kind of want to get back to the field before that happens so that we can kind of test stuff and proceed with this in a caution and go forward that way. All right. Saba says the problem here is the overly large foam heads preventing airflow from hitting the fletch. The only way I've found to correct this is to increase the fletch size or the shaft length. 15 feet was for bounce back off flat surfaces. We discovered that at Bifter. Worse with a rounded head. Yep. See, I agree with the 15-foot thing. The bounce back is rough. And then yeah, the fletchings they're not wide enough, I guess, to grab the air current or something like that. I know I'm not too much of a boyer. All I know is I brought crossbows to Bifter, and people really liked it. But I do have a boyer friend. Maybe we can chat about that, and maybe we can come up with something. But I'm not too. I'm rather happy with how my crossbows fly and the effectiveness that I get on the field with them. You need at least 8 inches of shaft to prevent in-flight wobble. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I also just for the sake of the rule that they had to be fired from a regular bow, I had to make them at least long enough that I could pull them back and fire them from my bow to demonstrate that they could be fired from a regular bow. So with that 8-inch thing, Saba has a good point here that maybe that might limit pistol crossbows in the future. I definitely could see people leaning towards wanting even smaller bolts because obviously if you have smaller bolts, you can kind of carry more, and they more in line with like historical bolts and the bolts they even give you with the thing. But I think the length of which we got right now is pretty effective. I haven't had too much problems. They are a little bit long. Maybe if they were a little bit shorter, it might be kind of cool. But um, I don't think I'd go under 8 inches anyways. Do I know of any good games to run at practice that use crossbows? That was a good question from Pet. Um, I don't know any of like specific games that cater specifically to crossbows. I know that I particularly enjoy like bridge battle games, like bridge battle capture the flag, or anything that has death zones. Um, just because it kind of creates those angles that you can get at where there's a skirmish line on the bridge where two shield walls are clashing and you can shoot in from the sides. Just like with a regular bow, I really like those kind of games when I'm running projectiles. Um, but as like a specific game for crossbows, I think you can pretty much throw them into any game that you're playing if you have a crossbow. Um, there are some times where like the big wild melees where um King of the Hill or stuff like that, those kind of might not be the best games, just because you're likely to bounce off of people's shields, possibly flying bolts everywhere, or getting your bolts stepped on even more. I don't think they could break any shorter. I mean, I'm sure they could, but I'd rather not test that. Oh yeah, Eagles next. So here we got a question or a good statement here. So the next class after this one, which I believe starts at 2, because I overestimated how long I would be talking, um, is battle games with Igwa. So maybe I'll get with him and we can figure out some sort of crossbow games or something like that. Um, And then I got a good question here. Where do I go to practice firing a crossbow? I actually just kind of do it in my house. I have a really long hallway and a garage door that I put a duct tape X on, and every now and then I'll just pick up my crossbow and uh, load it as fast as I can and shoot for accuracy. But most of the time, I really like fighting on the field with it, getting a sense of how people move and how they will try to react to where you're pointing it. That way you can adapt, and learning how to shoot moving targets is kind of the best way to make this a really good weapon. Um, but other than that, yeah. Also, when there's downtime at park, I'll load it and shoot trees, um, and then dust off the tree dust afterwards. Um, Saba has a good question. Will we push for crossbow knocks, half moons to be used as standard? Most mass-produced bolts you find at Walmart are just under half-inch diameter and have half moon knocks. I would love to see some sort of rules change that allows bolts to be allowed half moon knocks. That's what I have. Um, these are legal because they are knocks and they are in good repair. Um, I could also see trying to go for a push for the flat end knocks. Some of them do have flat ends. Um, and I think that people should be allowed to use what they want to use when it comes to their crossbow bolts. But we also still have to accommodate our weapons testers in a way. So if you're showing up with flat end crossbow bolts, but you didn't bring a crossbow, how are they going to test those? And that's kind of where I come in with um, I don't know why you would do that. I think anyone who's going to bring you crossbow bolts is going to bring you a crossbow as well. Um, So yeah. The question for that is, I don't know if it'll be the standard per se, but I think it should be an available option. And then if you have a tiny apartment, I think there's a question there about where would you shoot if you live in a tiny apartment. Outside is probably the best bet. And then Saba has a great note here is that crossbows are also regulated by city ordinance, so make sure you go check that out before shooting in public. Um, in the past, we've had cops call on us for regular bows. They come over, they see our arrows, they have a little chuckle, and then they leave us alone. So we haven't had any problems here. But that actually does bring me an interesting story. You'll notice that I actually put yellow tape on the tip of my crossbow here. And that's because with my last one before I broke it, or when I broke it, I was disassembling it to try and fix it before I bought a new one. And without the bow and with how small it was and all black, um, I was like, oh no, if someone saw me flash this for half a second, they'd think this was a real gun. So I decided to put this yellow tape on the tip. Um, so yeah, uh, it might be a good idea to put an orange or highlighter yellow piece of tape on the tip um, for your own safety. I think at a big event, people are kind of used to seeing crossbows around, so it won't be too big of a deal. Also, with when the bow is attached, it's kind of a little bit bulkier, but from like a side, especially if they can't see that, something to keep in mind. So thank you for that tip, Saba. Yeah, like I just said, yeah, black bows can cause police to draw on you if you lack the orange tip. So if you have that as an option, I'd really recommend it. All right, I think that's about all I can talk about. I'm sure there's stuff I'm forgetting just because I do get a little camera shy. This is I haven't done this as much as you would think. But yeah, if you have any more questions, I still got a couple more minutes before I'm completely tapped out. You can also shoot me messages on Facebook if you have any questions of like where to buy it, how did I make my bolts, how to know if your crossbow is going to be legal, combat tips, anything like that. My name is Dustin Acrid McCary on there, so it's really nice and easy to find me. Um, so yeah, there's that. And I got, let's see, Saba also recommends maybe plasti dipping or painting a black pistol, the pistol bow. Um, we actually have a friend that got wood grain contact tape and put it here, which was really neat, gave it a nice flair. So yeah, definitely feel free to decorate your crossbows. I know a few people that have gotten this very specific brand or this exact brand. So that'll also help you discover yours in weapons check. You can maybe even put like a little hole there, so you put like a key ring or something. I don't know, but that could help. And then the yellow tip, and that's why I also have this green string here, is because I hope I don't get shot when people see this. So, all right, thanks guys. All done.